Okay, so today I'm going to be doing a still life here with some cherry tomatoes. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right over there. I have it kind of in a box, but I'm getting all my setup together here. So everything's kind of static, if you will. Like, it's not really, I don't have it so you can move it around too much. But for the center bit here, I'm working with uh, a pre-toned surface, and so it's just a painting board or whatnot that's gessoed. And then I put a layer of what we call imprimatura on it. And so it's really just a tonal layer. And I use, this is a mixture. I think this one's actually Van Dyke Brown, but you can really use any color you want. Ultimately, depending on how you paint, the color may actually come through and help your colors as you paint. I like it because tonally um, it serves as a good kind of visual resting spot for when I start composing everything and creating it. Also, it helps steal the gesso, so your gesso is not acting like a sponge as you work. So there's a couple good reasons for it. Now in starting, most people, myself as well, starting with a sketch. So I'll just take a little bit of white in this case. If this was a blank canvas, I would use brown. But I just take liquid, keep it real light and loose, and then I'll come in here and let's see, and just start kind of sketching in the composition. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to be finding this as you go, so be okay with moving things. It's just really for placement. Now, everything's sitting on a box. So that's where the edge of the box is. Yeah, so already I can see that I'm a little off. So I'm going to go ahead and make this guy over here a little bit. You also want to take into account, at least for me, with these panels, when you frame them, there's going to be like a little edge on all sides. So canvases, you don't run into that issue, but with these panels, and so you may want to. So I might want to bring this in just a little bit. So that when it's framed, you don't have to have it like resting right on the frame. Work size a little bit more. This guy's pretty big. This guy's a little more. Okay. Okay. Now, so I'll take a minute just to look at things and see if this is really the composition I want. Because of the frame, I'm going to make a couple lines here to help me visualize that. And I think I'm okay here. I'm going to bring this down just a smidge more. lower this just a little bit. So it's kind of centered, but that's okay. So for when you do quick paintings, I'm not too concerned. It's it's more about in a lot of ways practice. You're exercising your color composition's part of it, but it's only going to be a couple hours. No, I do some paintings that can take up to months. You spend a lot of time with layers and glazing and detail work. It's more special effects, in a way, with color transparencies, saturations, glow, if you will. And, a lot of those qualities you don't really get with the alla prima or dry painting so much. It dries a little bit more chalky. Okay. All right. So now with that established, I can now begin here. Change the brush. I always start with the background. Think of it as overlapping. And in this case, it's a white wall. So what I'll do is I'll go for a dirty purple. And so for that, you just use a phthalo blue and then alizarin, or you can take red light to that as well. And I'll give you like a muddy-ish purple. The colors I use are very limited. There's a couple reasons for this. The main one, it's cheaper. You don't have to have, all these colors at your, disposal or whatever. But it also harmonizes. So if you're mixing with the same select colors, they tend to work together visually better, rather than having like 50, different colors and everything. When I do like layering pieces and stuff like that, glazing, all that, I will have more colors, like each one of these. So basically, a blue, for example, I have warm and cool, red, a warm and cool version, yellow, warm and cool version. And I'll do the same with like transparents. Now a lot of these are transparent, but like I'll break out my transparent red lights, yellows and everything. So you will see a variety, and there's certain specialty colors that they're hard to mix, or they're kind of unique. Whereas most colors you can get with these colors here, you can pretty much mix anything you want. So I found it to be the best, for affordability purposes, but it's also it tends to harmonize everything much better. Color mixing is a whole other thing in itself. And if if you're not sure about what I just talked about, you may want to just do some color mix. Have fun with that. And see, practice. The more color wheels you do, you're going to find that you'll start learning the colors more, like they're like a reflex. Oh, my hands in the way here. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm fairly new to recording myself here, so it's taken me a while to figure out the setup. So I've gone through a couple different types of cameras, and this is a DSLR camera here finally, but I noticed it jumps a little bit. So that jumpy notion that you're seeing, I don't know how to fix it. The camera itself doesn't have stabilization. So I apologize about that. It's not too significant though, so. But I'm sure you've picked up on that, so that is what is happening. That is why. Okay, so right about here, there's a bookcase. So I'm going to start mixing some colors to put into the books. I'll go for red, a little bit of green. There we go. That is right about here. Let's make it a little bit redder. There we go. And the next color is almost black. These are actually much wider than that. Mm. And there's a little bit of paper. Shine just a little bit. And since the frame's going to be right here, I'm just going to take that right to the edge. That is a bit strange to have in the image like that. There's a lot of things in the backgrounds that you won't necessarily be able to, they're kind of abstract. This being one of them. So it's just a matter of allowing the shapes, to be part of the composition. You don't want it to be too distracting. But if it's not coming across to the viewer, then it might be better to just remove it. Okay. Try to smooth out the background here a little bit. I tend to go over everything a couple times, so the first pass you're just kind of laying things in there, getting the composition down. I may decide to remove this here. I don't know how important that is visually. So we'll see there though. Okay. I'm gonna do a couple things here. So now I got a little ahead of myself. I'm gonna do the table next. The table or the box, it's a wooden box. It's more like it's almost like a flesh tone. So I'm just going to start with something like that, very light. Oh, it's too light. Let me darken it. I'm just going for a thin application. When you're direct painting, I do recommend that you try to keep things thin. The first time, your first pass, each time you apply paint, it builds up. And if it's oil, it's going to be, just wet on wet, and it's just going to continue becoming more and more difficult to put things on without intermixing with it, and it's hard to control, but it also muddies everything really easily if you're not careful. So, so a couple solutions. One is be really accurate every time you make a mark, and that's the mark. Um, or go thin when you start, so that when you build on top, you won't have these terrible muddying effects. Ideally, it's a marriage between the two, right? So you'll have a lot of accuracy with your marks, um, and you'll only apply the color into certain areas that you're going for exactly. But I do find it helpful to have a layer, first layer down, to establish everything, and then kind of work into it that way. And some people work differently, depending on what your preference is. Well, these guys do have shadows, so I'll try to leave a little spot open for them there. There we go. And then come back, clean up my marks a little bit. You do want to get in the habit of making your marks in the direction of the cross contour, or the texture, right? So the cross contour is basically the volume or the form. So if you're doing a globe, you wouldn't want to just fill it like rain. You want to have your marks in a way that enhances the dimension. And you saw when I'm first blocking things, and I do tend to be a little bit haphazard. Um, so take some care to clean that up if you can. As you progress through the painting, then you'll notice I'll be much more direct with how I make my marks as far as the cross contour goes. I am using Liquin. One of the nice things about Liquin when it comes to working prima is, and this applies to plein air too, is that it does start like tacking up after an hour or two. So it gets kind of like fly paper. And, and so if you do this if you cover everything, block everything in the first layer, that setting begins. And so when you get to those later stages that I was talking about where it muds and everything, and it slips around because there's so much paint on it, it will have a little bit more, tack to it, if you will. And if you're doing like plein air, I would actually recommend just before you even begin, coat your whole board or canvas with Liquin before you start. Real thin sheet layer Liquin, and then that'll serve as something that will stiffen or thicken as you work. But it takes time, a couple hours. It dries overnight, so solidify that edge there a little bit. There we go. So for the YouTube, well, one of my goals really is just to kind of share the process. So I do intend on doing more videos like this where I'm talking while I work. Um, but I'll probably have a lot where I just record myself working, and I'll oh, oops, sorry about that. Hit the camera. And I'll just speed everything up. Um, so it's not such a long thing, but I won't have any narration with it. And so the ones I narrate with or talk to, those will be more or less unedited. Now I do have some editing to throw in here, but um, I have found that recording does take some time. It's not the recording aspect of it; it's the editing. Um, so I don't know how many I can do, and I teach. So during the school year, I won't have as much time that I do. Right now it's the summer, so I can do more of these. But I would like to, make this more of a thing. And my goal with the YouTube is to actually get enough likes, if you will, so that what it turns into is I can actually start streaming. So I can just sit down because the editing is one thing, but if you're streaming, then it's just you're live, so it makes a lot of things a lot easier, and then you just have the video that way. So that would be a nice goal for me to aim for. Um, so yeah, but I thought why not? And so I do have a lot of experience with painting. I teach painting, teach drawing, uh, gallery management. Um, I've studied a lot of different styles. Let me change that, make that darker. So I feel I can provide a decent amount of at least insight. There's no rules when it comes to art, so you always got to keep that in mind. You're not trying to create a you're not. I don't like the idea of cookie cutter artists. Um, so it's playing with the materials, figuring out what you can do, what your limits are, and then from there, how do you make it into something you enjoy, or going for the effect maybe. So I tend to work, this what I'm doing here. This is more what I call straight painting. Um, and I do plan on doing more of this type of painting here. But for what I usually do, most of the time is the more drawn out, like layered processes, um, where I might have like a detailed underdrawing or underpainting, and then work on that, and then do these layers of glazes. Those are much harder to share with the recording. I did some recordings, um, which actually I probably won't be sharing though, because the camera I had at the time, it didn't really capture the details as I was doing it. But um, it's just it takes so much memory, because you're looking at like 60, 80 hours, of work in some cases, and to record that. So then the alternative would be just to like record like certain things, techniques or methods, and so maybe I'll do that sometime in the future. But the actual work process of developing, they're just too big, they're too large, the files are too big. But like a streaming type of arrangement that could be different, where I just hit record and I start working on a larger, longer project. Um, Periodically here and there. So that that's always a possibility. I am actually using a very small brush here. I just kind of realized that. I don't really recommend that. It does make everything take a little bit longer, especially when you're just blocking things in. But I'm almost done now, so I guess I'll just continue working with it. But um, as the painting progresses, I do tend to work with small brushes for the detail and stuff. But I found brush size to be kind of proportional to the canvas or the board you work on. Bigger canvases, you'll be using bigger brushes. This is a small. I think this is 6 by 8. It's pretty small. It's what we might call mini. Um, but at the same time, it's kind of a common size. A lot of artists work this size. Okay. Okay. So before I go very much further here, I'm gonna take a Q-tip and I'm gonna go through and just remove some paint where I'll be. For example, there's tomatoes in this box up here, so I'll be just so I'm not fighting over paint. And when I did the container itself, did miss the one slot here. This one's over here. A little bit more. Clean these guys up. Okay. And while I'm at it, add a little shadow underneath. Oh, and that back in. There we go. That's one of the issues with working small. These boards tend to move around on you unless you have it clamped down, which I don't. I don't have that option here right now. Okay. Start adding the tomatoes. So the tomatoes I got at a local Amish farm stand. And It's the kind that has like different types of tomatoes in it. So I thought it would make for a fun painting. This one's the darkest one. And I'm just going to block in their local color for now. So the local color, it's basically the base color of anything. You'll hear that expression blocking in local color a lot from a lot of artists. Sorry about that. This camera's so close. Yep. All right. So we got more or less our base. Now from here is where we start kind of going back and forth. the back one a bit bigger. I think I'm going to start by going into the background again here a little bit. Give that a little bit more depth. So I'm just using a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. The phthalo blue again, into that dirty purple. Add a little bit of green, this radiant green. That'll help gray it down. And since I already have some color in there, I'm not going to add much white to this. So I'll come back in, but I want to push this back. There's actually a corner of the wall that's right here. There's some molding here. Let me make this much darker. I'm not used to working with the camera in front of me like this. Keep hitting it. Yeah, way too late with the original application. Even darker. Now I'm going to push that even more. Need a lot more contrast. I'm going all out. I'm gonna go back into it here again. Still a little light though. I messed up in the first pass. There we go. Clean my palette real quick before I start. So I painted glass. I prefer to anyhow. So this is actually an old like food dining table that was cracked, so it's real thick. It's like I don't know, 3/4 of an inch thick. But I mean, once the corner breaks on it, you can't. So it's gonna get thrown away. So I decided to turn it into a studio table. But whenever I can find nice thick tempered glass, I pick it up for palettes. They're really easy to keep clean. You just need a razor. It's recommended to put something white behind it or underneath the glass to help you see the color. If I didn't have so much like overcrowding here, I got too much stuff in here, but it's all important stuff. But it'd be nicer to have like 3 feet, which I could if I clean. But I tend to just be working in the smaller area. It just means cleaning up more frequently. Okay. I only use turp to clean the brushes. I don't paint with it. A lot of people recommend painting with turp, but I don't agree. I mean, you can, but it also leads to cracking and all this other stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to go back into this box. So I'm going to take some green, white, and I also need to make the shadows. Start with the shadows. And just a little bit of green and red. And some blue. Paint's a little dry. And this, by the way, I have in my hand here is just quarter round. Find it useful. I just grab it with my pinky here. And it stabilizes, and it has kind of like a pendulum effect. So I'm just going to dab it. This is one of those composite paper boxes. It's got kind of like this gauzy texture to it. Got a lot of red in this mix here. So I'm really just trying to focus on the dark, dark, dark. Okay. Now here is where I'm going to add the green. I want to darken the side. Mix with the prior layer. I'll pop it a little bit back in. That's actually okay. So now I'm going to come in with the green, more highlighted. And, the further you go, once you start applying the color, you're going to be thinking more about the mark, not so much the blending. I think you've noticed I've been blending a lot. In the beginning, yeah. But as you start going, it's more about the mark, um, because you're going to be adding color temperatures to the mix. Um, you're going to have just a mark that's a warm, then a mark that's a cool, or maybe another color altogether. You're going to have them right next to each other. So this is more like, I don't know, it's almost like building, the framing of things in the beginning. I am going to move this over here. So if you see something wrong, fix it early, fix it right away. As soon as you notice it, don't let it linger. Because as you continue to paint, it's going to just bother you, and then it's harder to fix later. And then there is some reflective light up in here. On the shaded side. And a lot of alla prima, it is actually, I think, the favorite type of style painting for most people. Um, the consumer, if you will, the person that buys the art and puts it on their wall. Um, and I think it's, for a large part because of the expressive nature, the mark. But for that reason too, it's good to just not care so much. Be a little looser with how you make your mark. Don't be because I don't. Well, it depends who you are, I suppose. But a lot of artists are real caught up into how things look. How real it is, or something like that. And yeah, I mean that's good practice, but at the same time, if you're fairly decent, it's going to look real. It's not like, um, this is a box, for example. I think it's obviously a box. How real is it, though? That's when you start getting into those kind of profound redundancies that you might find yourself laboring away to make it super real. But most people don't care. They see a box. That's all they need to see. You've done it. Let it go. So in a way, it's also a good therapy for artists to do these types of paintings, especially if they are like that. I'm one. I'm guilty of that. Okay, I'm gonna. I was talking there. I noticed something. I did a. We have a tendency. Oops, sorry about hitting the camera there. We have a tendency to, and when I say we, it's being a teacher. I notice a lot of students do this. Um, we have a tendency to lift squares in the back up, the back edge. It's just something and I just did it. Um, but it's something I notice my students do a lot. So it's kind of a universal thing a lot of people do. So I'm dropping that down there on the edge again. There we go. Correction. So again, correct it when you see it. Make the correction. Make it early. Okay. Then we'll turn it. I think I'm going to go back into the table here. And again, the table is kind of like a flesh tone. It's kind of like a pinkish type of brown. But it's got all sorts of colors in it at the same time. So, um, so I got a little bit of a range here, some darks. And then I'm going to actually mix some of this blue in here. So when you have this, when you're mixing it on the palette, you can kind of create a color sequence pretty easily that you can just start dipping into. Okay. So start by bringing in some of the shadow. And the rule of thumb too, I mean, this is an old saying, but dark to light with painting. Um, your dark painting, think of it as overlapping. You do the shadows under the branch and the pine tree first, and then do the pine needles on top. If you do the pine needles first, then you have to go through and do the shadows, and it usually screws up all the pine needles then after you did that. So it's an overlap thing in a lot of ways. So it's quote unquote rule, but I'll often work light to dark, depending. So it's just something to be aware of. But working the background first I do feel that is really important, um, because you're overlapping as you come forward. But there's a number of reasons. One of the other ones that it's more of a psychological one. There's an awful lot of people that when they work, they go right into the subject. They say it's a portrait. They'll sit down and they're all eager and they just paint the person. And then once their excitement's over, um, when the portrait's painted and it's looking good, they lose their kind of gas. It's like all of a sudden they don't want to do anything else because what they set down to do is done. But it's not. They still have the background to do, and then they don't really want to do it, and so they'll either do something really lame, like real flat, or something like that, or uninteresting, um, or just block something in, or sometimes they'll just leave it completely unfinished, which seems to be a trend. Um, so it's not necessarily a good thing. So if you do the back first, you tend to put a little bit more time into it, a little bit more detail. It looks better. So it's just one of those things. Save the good stuff for last is what they're saying. You know, food, save your food. Good food. Eat your vegetables first. That kind of stuff. But I do see that there's actually cause and effect from starting right in with the subject first tends to lead to an unfinished painting. Right. Color is another thing, and that's probably for me that's my biggest. Uh, I do try to focus on color. Um, it's partly because it's something I struggle with. So um, you always want to think of color, and try to make it as colorful as you can. It's so easy to make neutrals in painting. And an awful lot of people still use like white and black for highlights and shadows. Yeah, the black is okay. You can use that's good way to just get there quickly, but you still have to add color to it. But the white, if you end up using the white too much, what you find is that it's gonna tint everything. So with painting, you have saturation of color, um, and if you have unsaturated colors in the foreground or throughout, maybe even you're going to find that the painting is going to be flat. So you want to try to always make effort to have the color up front, even if it's a highlight or a light surface. How are you gonna? The question is, how do you do that with color? And it's hard. It's not easy. So like concrete's a good example. Something that's gray. How do you make something gray full of color? And that's where optical mixing comes in. So look at Monet or the Impressionists, and well, Monet really didn't really have good control of color. But when Van Gogh, you start looking, Monet made a science out of it. Literally, you can see how he's practicing with all the different color overlaps, and but like look at Renoir, he's using black everywhere. Um, Van Gogh, though, Van Gogh, Seurat, how they're using that color interchangeably, intermixing it. Um, that's that broken color. Chuck Close, he's another one. Um, all different styles, of course, but you know, putting that color to work, letting the eyes, kind of bring it together, the image. And seeing it too. So when you look at like highlights and shadows and stuff, look for that color. Usually it's just a hint, and don't be afraid to exaggerate it. And some of the greatest painters out there today, you look at their work, and some of them are working with almost pure color, but you don't see it that way. But then you look at it close, and it's like, my God, it's like pure yellow they're using. In this box, I did forget to. It's got a big chip in it. Always look at what you're painting. Feel the texture. How would you make that texture? Try not to pattern too much. Easy trap to fall into. Okay. Now let's get this chip started. I'm not sure if you guys can see it or not, but see this how it looks blue here? If you guys remember when I first did that, it was actually like an orange, but that is from laying it down thin and the imprimatura, which is underneath, which is that dark brown. It creates a blue effect. And, we call that optical gray or blue, optical blue. But you don't really see it until you start putting down pure color, but that's another thing to be aware of, that imprimatura, how it kind of comes through later in its effects. Clean up some of this. And the shadow's a little too big. That's a bit too much. Let me clean that up. Okay. Come back to that. That one here, let's see. There's a little bit of white to it. No, white desaturates. I'm taking that same mix that I had. And then I'm going to go into the back here. Try to maintain that texture. That wooden feel. And if it starts like becoming unworkable, leave it alone for a little bit. And go on to something else and come back. And if it becomes completely unworkable, you can always wipe it off. Start over. I'll become that colorless. There. So I'm just going to start with some, yeah, I'll start with the light red rather than starting with the dark darks. Sorry about that. Okay. And a little bit of stems here. Just treating it dark. I always had highlights later. Okay. Not too bad so far. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean my palette again. And clean my brushes. And so it's just pass after pass after pass. Just do a pass, do another pass. Tighten up the details as you go. Try to always get more colorful as you go. Even though well, I think you guys were able to see. It's like, I thought I was being colorful at first, but as each pass goes, you'll see that you need more color, more color, and at the end, you actually are. You're literally like using pure yellow, pure blue, pure purple to make the visual effect. Colors part of the broken color optical mixing thing. It's a green next to the purple is going to look different than a green next to a red, for example. So how you apply your colors, they're not going to look as vibrant in certain cases or instances, even though it is a pure color you're using. So you gotta be aware of that as well. And sometimes, oddly as it might sound, using an opposite color, like a complement, has a better highlight, for example. And then that's when you start getting into dynamic color use, which you might see a little bit here. As it evolves, I might start doing some of that. But I am going to try to keep this relatively short, so keep it expressive. Clean. Okay. So I think I'm gonna start the background again. This time I'm gonna push it much darker. Before I get purple. There we go. And I don't want the screaming purple, so because it's already kind of purple, so I'm going to actually add a lot of green to it, and the green will, talking about color, the green here should, when I put this down, this right now this is all really purple back here, but when I start putting the green down, it should have a negating effect. And I'm treating it a little bit lighter than I had in the past. But it should give it a sense of further darkness. I'm going to blend it softer too. So, but you can see, oops, sorry. You can see that it's receding more. People are still shooting off their 4th of July fireworks. And I'm just going to pepper it. Okay. I'm going to go more full. It's kind of created like a halo. So try to correct that, make it stronger. More solid. There we go. There we go. the other back. Okay. I'm also going to solidify that book in the back. Darken that quite a bit. There we go. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with this. Make this more black. I don't want to draw a lot of attention to it. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to work on the box again. Start some of the pure color. Actually, I think I have to And bring some of that nice minty green into it. Actually, I think I'm going to add a little yellow. Just a smidge. Okay. Oh. And the paint's starting to get a little tacky now. It's grabbing. It's easier. Nice. Little by little. Progress here, little progress there. So I miss. Sky is green. Okay, close. Let's start working on highlights. And I need to clean my station one more time. Here come the highlights. And actually start with tomatoes. So this is where those components kind of come in. So especially for the yellow tomato here. So basically, what I've mixed is like a magenta sort, uh, but it with a lot of white. But because it has magenta or purple in it, it's gonna resonate much brighter than just a plain white wood. Everything's on the way. Okay. I'm going to take that same, well, a little bit more pink, but do a similar thing on the wood here. This time, try to get the wood texture more liquid. Work on the container a little bit. If possible. Oh, it's getting pretty dirty. This is actually a yellow green highlight. It seems to be popping better. Lots of liquid. Okay. All right. Okay. And I think I'll leave it at that for everybody. There are other things I could do here, but it's pretty close. Maybe a little bit of blue. Help seat these. It also helps kind of pop it. Sorry about that. Okay. Bring a little more. Okay. I think we'll leave it at that. So there's always little things you can do I can add here and there. But I think it's a good one. So leave it at that. All right. See everybody later. Bye. How's that? There we go. There we go.